Today I want to share with you some keys around how to deal with conflict and with another person. I learned this from working with young people and families who are in a crisis over the last 20 years. So a lot of my psychology experience has come from working with people who are under a tremendous amount of stress and were in a crisis. Usually the young person was making choices that were really destructive towards themselves or from other people. And I spent a lot of time, like 3 months, intensively with these young people and with the families. I lived with them for a period of time. We lived in a residential care facility that was actually in the outdoors, so I spent lots of time getting to know these young people and getting to know these families. I was very blessed to be let into their lives. So I've learned a lot around how to connect with young people who don't want to connect with you and need to engage in a tough conversation consistently, right? So let's get into this. The first thing that you want to do when you're in a conflict and you're having a conversation is you want to look at what you can own and how you are contributing to the conflict. Now, this might seem counterintuitive. Well, the first thing actually would become aware of how you're feeling, right? And that kind of goes without saying, so I need to say it anyway. So the first thing that we want to do is own how we're contributing to the conflict, our own experience, what we're aware of emotionally for ourselves. And we want to look at okay, how am I making this situation worse? Am I freaking out because of the choices that this young person is making, for example, or if it's a relationship with my partner or a friend or a roommate? What can I own around how I'm contributing? Like, for example, right now I live with someone and we have different standards for cleanliness. And I have these conversations consistently where I'm kind of like, it's not meeting my cleanliness goal, like how we're doing. And so I come with, in this example, which is a bit of a minor one, I'll own that my standard for cleanliness is very high. And I can even be pretty rigid about it, which is true. Right? So the reason that I'm doing that is that I'm setting the tone and softening the tone for the conversation. Because what we ultimately want to have happen, the goal of any conflict is resolution. But what does resolution actually mean? What it actually means is that each person takes accountability for their part in what's happening. That will resolve the conflict every single time. Is ownership around how they're contributing, because then that starts a new conversation around great, I'm doing this and you're doing that. How can we work together to move whatever this is forward, right? And so it's counterintuitive and it's a risk, because if you make yourself vulnerable, you might get hurt or judged or yelled at, or they may not kind of lower their guard, so to speak, like you are, and it's a risky proposition. But I'm telling you, if you do it, it creates the highest probability for the conflict to get resolved, right? So come into the experience and share something vulnerable about what you can own around how you're contributing to what's happening. It'll instantly set the tone. And especially if you were in some kind of a power position with that person, let's say they're an employee or a student or a child, whatever it is, you are creating the certain tone by starting the conversation, right? And in this example that I'm giving you, I'm putting this together as if you were the one who's starting the conversation. If someone starts the conversation with you and comes in pretty hot, do what you can to take some ownership, and then hopefully they get to the point where they can actually take some ownership. It depends on the emotional maturity of the person that you're navigating them with. And I'll create something else that talks about what to do with someone who's not emotionally mature and they're not changing at all. And we'll get to that in step 3 a little bit, but I'll create another video around that. So the first thing is take some ownership around what you're doing to contribute to the conflict. It sets the tone. Secondly, get their perspective. Understand what's happening for them over there and just listen. Ask questions, offer reflections, really try to get inside of their experience as much as you can. Now you'll see in these steps so far, you're not really sharing that much. Like, you're sharing something, but the goal is not for them to understand you. Your goal is for you to understand them. Because if you can understand them, then they will have more of a capacity to understand you. And anytime there's a conflict, usually one of the people is more reticent to dive in and take some ownership over something because they're feeling protective or defensive or whatever it may be. So this is a secret to having them lower their guard, is you being vulnerable through taking some ownership first, and secondly, through focusing on getting their perspective and understanding what's going on with them, right? And then number 3, make choices. Now what does this mean? After you get through the conflict, or it's maybe you do what I'm telling you to do, you take some ownership and you're vulnerable, you listen to their perspective, and there isn't a resolution, then it might be time to make some choices, but don't make the choices right then. Complete the conversation with gratitude. Thank you. I appreciate that we've been able to share a little bit. It doesn't feel like it's resolved for me, but so be it. I don't think there's anything else to do here. Let's take up some space, or I've got to go do something, and we can connect later. This is the moment where you really contemplate for yourself. Is this a relationship that you want to stay in? Is this a job that you want to stay in? Is there another conversation that you want to have before you make a significant choice? If they are your son or your daughter or your child, what are some of the choices that you're going to make that's going to create some influence in their own psychology and their maturity level that has them shift in a certain way? You can continue to have these conversations, especially in a parent-child relationship, that will create some leverage and influence with the young person to become different, essentially, and to grow, right? If you're in another relationship, whether it's a peer-to-peer relationship or a professional relationship, you can have more of these conversations, but if they don't go well, then that's reflective of either the person not being a fit for your role or you not being a fit for the role, right? And there's things that can change. Either you're going to change or the situation's going to change, right? What I found for myself, the more that I grow, the more that my situations grow, right? So this is the 3rd step, is to contemplate and make some choices and share them later. Hope this is helpful for you. Give a like or subscribe if you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time. All my best.